Reflecting on it now, the warning signs were unmistakable. They were scattered throughout the final months of our relationship, like subtle hints I chose to ignore. After being together for 3 years, I convinced myself to trust her, to give her the benefit of the doubt, even when my instincts told me otherwise. It began with minor changes. Emily started staying late at work more frequently, which wasn't entirely out of the ordinary, especially during hectic periods. But then there were other things. A new, unfamiliar scent she wore, clothes in our closet that I didn't remember her buying, and her phone, which suddenly became a guarded possession, always within reach. I've never been the jealous type, but something didn't feel right. The way she'd tense up when I hugged her from behind while she was texting, the way she'd excuse herself to take calls, insisting they were work-related, and the endless girls' nights with friends I'd never met. It all added up to a growing unease. Last Tuesday, as I was folding laundry, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. A notification from someone named Alex flashed on the screen. "Miss you already? Last night was..." The rest of the message was hidden, but those few words were enough to make my stomach twist. I never wanted to be the kind of person who invades their partner's privacy, but it felt like the universe was shoving the truth in my face. That evening, when she came home, I knew I had to confront her. She was in the kitchen, casually blending a smoothie as if everything was perfectly normal. The whirring of the blender echoed through the apartment while I stood in the doorway, silently observing her, gathering the courage to speak up. "Who's Alex?" I asked as soon as she turned off the blender. Her reaction was immediate. Her shoulders stiffened, her body language shifting in an instant. But then, to my surprise, she smiled. It wasn't her familiar, comforting smile. It was colder, sharper, almost as if she'd been waiting for this moment. That smile sent a chill through me, and in that instant, I knew something was terribly wrong. "I was wondering when you'd finally figure it out, Daniel," she said, calmly taking a sip from her glass. "Alex is my boss, and yes, I've been sleeping with him for the past 2 months." Her tone was so casual, so unapologetic, it felt like a punch to the gut. There was no remorse, no hesitation, just a cold, almost defiant pride in her voice. It was as if she'd been waiting to drop this bombshell, and the ease with which she said it left me stunned and speechless. "I needed a real man," she went on, her lips curling into a smirk. "Someone who knows what he wants and isn't afraid to go after it. Not someone who wastes his weekends playing video games with Ryan and binge-watching pointless movies." I stood frozen, trying to absorb what she was saying. 3 years of being together, and this was her true opinion of me. Amid the shock, a different feeling began to surface. Not rage, but a sharp, almost liberating clarity. "Does Sophia know about this?" I asked, my mind immediately going to the friend who had brought us together. "Oh, she's known for weeks," Emily said with a laugh. "Actually, most of our friends know. They get it. Alex can actually offer me a future, not just empty dreams and excuses." That stung more than the confession of her affair. These were people we'd celebrated birthdays with, shared holidays, and sat across from at countless dinners. They'd all been aware of what was happening, likely whispering and laughing behind my back the entire time. I grabbed my phone and opened the group chat with Ryan and Sophia. "Is this true? You all knew?" Ryan replied almost instantly. "Look, man, you're a great guy, but Emily deserves someone who's more established. Don't take it too personally." Sophia added, "We didn't want to hurt you, but maybe this is the push you need to get your life on track." Reading their messages, I felt a mix of betrayal and disbelief. Even the people I considered closest had been complicit in this. I glanced up from my phone to see Emily watching me, that same smug smirk still etched on her face. She was clearly waiting for me to lose it, to yell, cry, or make a scene she could later recount to her friends as proof of my so-called immaturity. But instead I smiled, a calm, genuine smile that seemed to throw her off balance. Without saying a word, I walked to our bedroom, grabbed my go bag — I'd always kept one ready for spontaneous weekend trips — and collected my laptop and keys. As I passed through the kitchen again, Emily's smirk wavered, her confidence slipping for the first time. "Where do you think you're going?" she demanded, her voice tinged with irritation. "Out," I said simply. "And Emily, you can keep the apartment. I'm sure Alex will help you with the rent." I heard her start to say something as I shut the door behind me, but I didn't pause to listen. My phone was already buzzing with notifications, likely from our so-called friends trying to justify their actions. As I drove away, I powered off my phone and felt something I hadn't anticipated: relief. Sometimes losing everything reveals what you never truly had to begin with. I didn't have a clear destination in mind, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was finally moving in the right direction. Update 1. First off, thank you all for the overwhelming support on my last post. I never imagined it would resonate with so many people. A lot has happened over the past week, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all. Right now, I'm staying at a modest motel on the edge of town. It's not exactly luxurious, but it's clean and quiet. The owner, Frank, an older guy with a kind demeanor, even gave me a $20 discount on the weekly rate after hearing a bit of what I've been through. Small gestures like that have been a bright spot in all of this. After 2 days of silence, I finally turned my phone back on. It immediately lit up with notifications: 32 missed calls, 47 text messages, mostly from Emily, a few from Ryan and Sophia, and some from numbers I didn't recognize. But what really grabbed my attention was the flood of activity on social media. Emily had been busy, really busy. Her Instagram story painted a version of our relationship that I barely recognized. According to her, I was a controlling, jealous boyfriend who monitored her every move. She claimed I had emotionally manipulated her for years, isolated her from her friends, and even thrown a violent tantrum when she finally stood up for herself. Each post was flooded with hundreds of sympathetic comments, including ones from people I once considered friends. It was surreal, seeing my life rewritten in real time. The crown jewel of her campaign was a tearful video where she accused me of financially abusing her by forcing her to split all our bills 50-50 while I supposedly hoarded my money. The irony was almost laughable. She earned more than I did and had been the one to insist on that arrangement in the first place. Just as I was processing that, I got a text from Lily, a coworker I've known for years. "Hey, you might want to check your email. Something's going around the office about you." Sure enough, there it was. A company-wide email about fostering a safe workplace environment with a vague but pointed reference to recent concerning behaviors from certain employees. No names were mentioned, but the timing made it painfully obvious who they were talking about. I probably should have been furious. Maybe I should have fought back, shared my side of the story, or tried to clear my name, but instead I just felt a strange sense of curiosity. How far would she go with this? As it turns out, pretty far. Yesterday, I stopped by our local coffee shop, the one place I thought would be safe since Emily had always hated their coffee. I was wrong. The barista, who used to greet me with a smile, gave me a look like I was something she'd scraped off the bottom of her shoe. Later, I found out Emily had started frequenting the place, spinning her survival story to anyone willing to listen. It's unsettling how quickly a narrative can spread, especially when it's fueled by someone as convincing as her. But here's where things took an unexpected turn. While I was picking up some clothes from storage, I ran into Mia, Emily's supposed best friend. She looked visibly nervous, constantly glancing over her shoulder as if afraid someone might see her talking to me. "You need to be careful," she whispered urgently. "Alex isn't just her boss. His wife. She's connected. Like, really connected. And Emily's been telling her you're unstable, even dangerous." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Mia's eyes darted around again before she leaned in closer. "Because this isn't the first time. Before you, there was another guy at work. Emily and Alex did the same thing to him. He ended up leaving town. That conversation with Mia changed everything. I spent the entire night digging, scouring legal records, social media, anything I could find. And sure enough, the previous guy, Chris, was real. His online presence vanished around the same time Emily started working at the company. It was eerie, like he'd been erased. This morning, I got a call from our landlord. Emily had tried to remove my name from the lease, claiming I'd abandoned the property. When that didn't work, she told him I'd been threatening her. He called to give me a heads up. Turns out his sister had gone through something similar years ago, and he wasn't about to let history repeat itself. It's strange how the truth has a way of surfacing, even when someone's trying their hardest to bury it. But here's the real twist. In the middle of all this chaos, I received a message request on Instagram from an account I didn't recognize. The profile picture was of a woman in her 40s, polished, elegant, and wearing what looked like very expensive jewelry. The message was short and to the point. "I believe we need to talk about my husband and your girlfriend. Coffee tomorrow." It was signed Mrs. A. I'm meeting her in an hour, and something tells me Emily's carefully crafted narrative about her real man is about to unravel in ways she never anticipated. The irony is, watching her weave this intricate web of lies and seeing our so-called friends blindly take her side has been oddly freeing. Every exaggerated post, every staged tear, every twisted story only reinforces what I've come to realize. I'm not losing anything worth holding on to. Update 2. Apologies for the delay in updating. These past 2 weeks have been nothing short of chaotic. That coffee meeting with Mrs. A, it was a complete game changer. Turns out she's been quietly collecting evidence for months, not just about Emily and her husband, but about a broader pattern of behavior within the company. Remember how Mia mentioned the guy who left town? He wasn't the only one. Mrs. A had documented at least 3 similar cases over the past 5 years. Young employees getting entangled with her husband only to help push out anyone who might threaten their secret. But this time, Mrs. A wasn't willing to stay silent. She had everything: texts, emails, expense reports, even security footage from the company parking garage. The only thing missing was public exposure, and she wanted my help to make sure the truth couldn't be buried again. It was a lot to take in, but I knew I couldn't walk away. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about holding them accountable for everything they'd done. That's where the annual company party came into play. I hadn't planned on attending. Why would I? But Mrs. A had a different plan. Sometimes, she told me, the best revenge is simply letting people reveal their true colors. The party was held at a swanky downtown hotel, and I showed up late, dressed sharper than I ever had for these events. The reactions when I walked in, absolutely priceless. Emily nearly dropped her glass, and Alex's face cycled from red to white so quickly I thought he might faint. But the real beauty of it was was this: I didn't have to lift a finger. Sophia was the first to approach me, clearly a few drinks in. "You've got some nerve showing up here," she slurred, her voice loud enough to draw the attention of nearby groups. "After everything you put Emily through." I simply smiled and replied, "Everything I put her through? That's interesting. Tell me more." That's when Lily stepped in. Remember her? My coworker? It turns out she'd been quietly gathering her own evidence. Screenshots of Emily boasting about her conquests in company chat groups. Recordings of her plotting how to spin the story with Alex. "Actually," Lily announced, her voice steady and clear, "I think we'd all like to hear the real story." The next hour felt like watching a carefully orchestrated domino effect. Mrs. A made her entrance at the perfect moment, tablet in hand. The projector, which had accidentally turned on, began displaying a slideshow of incriminating messages, photos, and expense reports. Emily's attempts to control the narrative grew more frantic and desperate by the minute, but the real spectacle came from Ryan. Good old bros before hoes. Ryan, who had been filming everything on his phone, hoping to prove his loyalty to Alex by capturing the chaos. Instead, he ended up recording Emily's full-blown meltdown. "You think you're so clever," Emily screamed at me, her voice shaking with rage. "You and that bitter old woman trying to ruin everything I've built. Alex loves me. We're going to have a life together." That's when Mrs. A stepped forward, calm and composed, and dropped the final bombshell: divorce papers, already filed. She revealed that Alex had been feeding Emily the same promises he'd given to the others. Same script, different actress. The best part? Through all of it, I barely said a word. I just stood there, watching years of manipulation and deceit unravel in real time. The room was electric with tension, but I felt an odd sense of calm. Then Mia, who had been silent all evening, finally spoke up. Her voice trembled as she addressed the room. "I helped her," she admitted. "I helped Emily destroy that other guy's reputation. I can't do it again." By midnight, the party was over in every sense of the word. Emily had stormed out, her mascara smeared and her composure shattered. Alex was holed up in his office with HR, likely trying to salvage what little he could of his career. And those so-called friends who had been so quick to believe Emily's lies, they couldn't even meet my gaze as I walked out. As I was leaving, Mrs. A gently caught my arm. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady but filled with gratitude, "for being the one who didn't run." I drove back to the motel, a strange sense of peace settling over me. Frank was still up, sitting in the office and watching late-night TV. He took one look at my face and grinned. "Good night?" I couldn't help but smile back. "You could say that." Last update. This is the conclusion, the final installment of this intense journey. Believe me, it's been an absolute roller coaster. You might want to settle in with some snacks for this one. To start, the fallout from the company party was far more explosive than anyone anticipated. Within just 2 days, both Alex and Emily were forced to step down. But that was merely the tip of the iceberg. Recall those documents Mrs. A had gathered? Well, it turns out there was a lot more to uncover. Way more. Every falsified expense report Alex used to hide his business dinners with Emily. Every email where they schemed to undermine colleagues. Every performance review they tampered with. Mrs. A presented all of it to the board. The company's legal team acted swiftly, incredibly so. They were less focused on the personal affairs and more alarmed by the consistent workplace harassment and financial wrongdoing. Now, Alex and Emily are both staring down the barrel of civil lawsuits. But this is where things take a wild turn. Remember Chris, the one who left town? Well, he returned, and he came prepared with evidence, both literal and metaphorical. As it turns out, he had meticulously documented everything before his departure, including the malicious smear campaign orchestrated by Emily and Alex against him. He just hadn't figured out how to use it until now. Mrs. A connected him with her lawyer, and within 3 days he filed his own lawsuit. The plot thickens. Then, something truly remarkable unfolded. Other former employees began stepping forward, each sharing their own stories and presenting their own evidence. What began as a single scandal quickly snowballed into an overwhelming avalanche. Emily tried to control the narrative. She posted a tearful video portraying herself as the true victim, claiming she had been manipulated by Alex and was now being unfairly targeted. But that's when Mia finally found her courage. She released screenshots of their private conversations, messages where Emily boasted about her exploits, plotted to ruin reputations, and cruelly mocked those she had harmed. The truth was out, and it was damning. Last week, Emily showed up at my motel. Frank, the owner, called me at work. "That girl you warned me about? She's causing a scene in the parking lot." I took my time driving back. When I arrived, I found her sitting on the hood of my car, her mascara smeared, clutching a manila envelope. "I have dirt on everyone," she said, trying to sound menacing despite the tremor in her voice. "If you don't help me put an end to this, I'll expose it all." I couldn't help but laugh. "Go ahead, burn every last bridge you've got. Let's see how that plays out for you." She hurled the envelope at me. Inside were photos, screenshots, private messages, all the ammunition she'd gathered over years of manipulating people, her so-called insurance policy. I calmly took pictures of every single page while she watched, then handed it back to her. "Release whatever you want. But first, take a good look at where all your scheming has landed you. The thing about people like Emily, they can't handle it when their own weapons are turned against them. Right there in the parking lot, she ripped the envelope to shreds, screaming about how we'd all live to regret this. And that meltdown, someone caught it on camera. Within hours, it was everywhere on social media. The final nail in the coffin came yesterday. Mrs. A's divorce was officially finalized, and guess what? She walked away with everything. The house, the cars, the majority of their assets. As for Alex's golden parachute from the company, wiped out, drained by legal fees, his reputation, utterly ruined, and his future career prospects, let's just say Google isn't exactly his ally these days. As for Emily, the latest I heard is that she's moving back in with her parents in another state. Her social media has gone completely silent, and those friends who stood by her, they're now dealing with their own mess. Turns out betting on the wrong side comes with consequences. Ryan tried to apologize yesterday, sending this lengthy message about how he should have been a better friend. I simply replied with a screenshot of his old messages supporting Emily. He blocked me. Typical coward. Sophia's scrambling to do damage control too. She's terrified those screenshots Emily hoarded might ruin her own career. I almost feel bad for her. Almost. As for me, I just signed a lease on a new apartment and landed a promotion at work. Funny how cutting out toxic people improves every aspect of life. And yeah, I'm seeing someone new, taking it slow, doing it right this time. The best revenge isn't about plotting or scheming. It's about living well and letting people destroy themselves. But I won't lie, watching it all go up in flames has been incredibly satisfying. This is my final update. Thanks for joining me on this wild journey, Reddit. Remember this, karma doesn't need your help. Sometimes all you have to do is step back and let people reveal their true colors.